In my woodworking and filmmaking career, there are two things I said I would never do. Make a shop tour video and make a cutting board. Unless I needed one. It seems to me that every maker channel on YouTube at some point in its existence makes a cutting board. But now that I'm living by myself, I'm cooking for myself, I decided that I wanted this cooking, preparation, cutting board surface, and I wanted it to be kind of big and I wanted it to be out of wood. And I didn't want it to warp. So I need a cutting board. The material that I'm using is just some hardwood scraps that were some trim on a bathroom vanity or a desk or some hardwood thing I got out of the trash. And the operation you just saw was me using a cheap skill saw blade to get all of the paint off so that way I don't damage anything more serious like my planer or a good saw blade or anything like that. And I used the push sticks for the second operation, but for you safety nuts that are getting on my case already, I do get like the whole, like why safety is important. I know that from experience.
Love goes on and on. Love will. Life is brief.
So the way I'm doing this so it won't warp is that I'm going to have 3 layers. 2 going in this direction, and then in between them, sandwiched in, is going to be a layer of junk wood that's going this direction, sort of like plywood, to prevent the wood from warping. So we have cross-directional grain. So what I got to do next is gather up all these little scraps to sandwich in between these 2 layers. So after gluing up the middle section, I went ahead and glued up the other 2 sides, so those are all set. This piece in the middle of the sandwich did not have to be all these scraps glued together. It could have been a piece of plywood, it could have been larger scraps glued together, it could also have just been a solid block. The cutting board also could have just been a piece of plywood. It really didn't matter, but hey, at the end of the day, I got to use up some scraps in my scrap pile. More labor intensive route, taking the time to cut up all the scraps and then glue them all together. But like I said, we used up some scraps. You know, I was thinking about it too, and I think this is the first project where I've actually made something out of hardwood, being oak or walnut or maple or something of that sort. Maybe other than my skateboard deck, but I feel like an official woodworker now because I make something that's not out of pallets or 2x4s or trash or scraps. was a bigger pain in the butt than I thought it would be to get this board to sit flat. After all that planing and sanding, this is what material is left. And going all the way around, you can see the very thickness between the top and bottom pieces. I mean, just look how thin that bottom piece is. It would have been a lot better to have done this glue up in a press as opposed to doing all the clamps. The clamps didn't keep the board flat, and a press would have pressed the board against something flat, which would have ultimately glued the board together flat. It would have been a lot less work having to do all the planing and sanding to get the board to be actually flat and not rock when I'm using it on the countertop. I was also hoping I'd have enough material so after this board's been used for a long time, I'd be able to plane it down and theoretically have an entirely new cutting board, but it doesn't look like I'm going to have that option. So whenever this board gets very well used, that'll be it. But then again, this is also the first cutting board I've ever made, so I think it's coming out okay.